Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Andrew's Life. I hope everyone's having a wonderful Saturday. I know I cannot complain. I'm just a little stressed out to be completely honest. I made a I told for those of you that have been watching my channel, I told you briefly on one of my videos that my air conditioning went out during the time I was up in the Dakotas. When I came back home, the house was very hot, very humid, and at that point I knew there was something wrong with the air conditioning unit. So to make a long story short, I immediately called for someone to come out and check my unit, and it was determined that, well, let me back up. Now my air conditioning unit was repairable. If I wanted to spend anywhere from 1,000 to, I'll just say, $1,900, I could have repaired what I had. But taking into consideration that, for starters, the particular unit that I had was close to 20 years old, which means the life expectancy of the unit was close to its end. And secondly, I didn't tell you guys this, but this past Christmas, like down here, when it got like abnormally cold during that cold spell that most of the country experienced. I mean, down here on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the temperatures were like very low. I mean, if I can remember correctly, like during the morning, the temperature was like, I want to say 15, 16 degrees. And it only warmed up to maybe in the upper 20s for those couple of days. And during those couple of days, my climate control unit, because my air conditioning and my heater and my furnace, it's all in one. So I call it climate control. I mean, down here in the South, we don't have too many appliances that are gas. Down here, you're gonna have more of your climate control appliances being all electric. So with that being said, I call it climate control because my heat and my air all comes out of the same system. So, anyways, during the Christmas holiday, I I barely had any heat. I mean, I would say I had just enough heat in this house for, you know, I had just enough heat in this house for those couple of days for my pipes not bust. Because those couple of days, the temperature inside my house was, I want to say it was in the low 60s. I mean, typically during the wintertime, I keep my house at around 68 to 69 degrees. But during those couple of days, the temperature was it is like maybe 61, 62. And I had to plug in my little portable heating units for extra heat. So now I was going to have somebody come out and check out my unit during that time, but after it warmed up, my my heating began to work like it was supposed to, so I just kind of let it slide. But after this past after this past week, or whenever it was that my air conditioning unit went out, I decided that it would be in my best interest to replace the unit. That way, in the future, I wouldn't have to worry about my climate control, whether it be air or heat, going out. So, well, I got the bill right here. I mean, I'm gonna try to hide the company. Not that they're bad people, because they're wonderful people. But, this is the internet, so it is what it is. But here's my bill. Let's see if I can hide the company here. Give me one second. See, this was my bill for a new climate control unit. Let's see. Oh, put it this way. $7,500. That is how much I had to pay for a new climate control unit. Now, I did have a couple of other companies come over here and look at everything, and they gave me prices as well. And of course, their prices were significantly higher than the company that I chose to use. So I make this video because there's a lot of you that are still out here in a rush, in a frenzy to purchase a house. And my attitude is uh, if you're currently paying rent and you're sick and tired of paying rent, rent prices went up, whatever the case, and that's the only reason why you're looking into buying a house. Now, if you find something that you really want that is within reasonable price, go ahead and do what you do, as long as you can afford it, of course. But if you're out here looking at houses and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not, you know what, these prices are too high. You know what? Quit looking. Don't quit looking, but don't buy anything. You know, don't go beyond your means is what I'm trying to tell you, folks. And also, uh, the fact that my climate control unit went out, that is also the reason why I absolutely refuse to own multiple homes. There's some people that might own two homes. You got your primary home, and then maybe you own a vacation home. Now, I talked about this a little bit ago. It's probably about I don't know, it's probably close to a year ago that I discussed this briefly about owning multiple house. Well, I don't know if I talked about it now. I can't remember, but I'm gonna talk about it real briefly. You see, this right here is the reason why I absolutely refuse to own multiple houses. Because one thing that you guys gotta bear in mind is, even though you're not at a house, like for an example, if your vacation home is in, let's say, Florida, and you just go down to Florida during the winter, well, guess what? During the rest of the year, like during the summer and spring and fall, when it's warmer down there, you're gonna still have to run some kind of air conditioner in order to avoid, uh, in order to keep down the mildew and the humidity from causing mold to your home. And of course, when you run your climate control unit like that, it's going to incur bills. And sooner or later, your climate control unit will no longer work and you will have to replace it. Like I had to replace mine here. Now, and that's the reason why I absolutely refuse to buy a second house or a vacation house. Unless I'm buying that second house to rent out and to make some money, I'm not going to just go out here and buy a second house just to have a second house just for whatever. Like last year, there was a period of time to where I did own a second house. I owned a house here in Alabama, and I also owned another house up in Indiana because I'm thinking, okay, I go up to Indiana fairly often, like every 2, 3 months, give or take. I visit friends up there. And typically, while I'm up there, I might drive a few hours east into Ohio and visit my family. And I'm thinking, what's the harm in owning a second house as long as I can afford it? Well, for me, the harm was in reality, I couldn't afford it. Because not only did I have to factor in the cost of the house itself, but I also had to factor in the repairs, the maintenance. Even though I was not at that second house on a day-to-day basis, I was only there for maybe a week or two at a. I might drop in for a week or two at a time, and then come back down here to Alabama. So even though that second house, I was not there full time, I was not utilizing the space or many of its futures full time. I still had to like my case up in Indiana, like during the winter time, I still had to keep the furnace on because if I chose to cut off the furnace, then my pipes would bust whenever it got real cold outside, which up in Indiana during the winter time, anyone that knows their geography knows that in Indiana during the winter time it gets rather cold. So I had to keep on the heat in order for my pipes to not bust. And also in order for me to avoid having to deal with a bunch of condensation, which ultimately over time will cause mold, I had to keep the heat on for that purpose. Because if I would have kept my second house up in Indiana at the time, and I would have decided to not run the heat, that would have caused condensation. And over time, that condensation would have built up to the point where I would have began to grow mold. And the money I would have had to spend on mold repair to get it done properly would have most likely been more money than what I would have had to pay over time just to simply run the heat during the winter and then during the warmer months run some type of air. And of course, with running the heat, running the air, I mean, at some point, those components are going to go out and I'm going to have to replace those units, which means as long as I own that extra property, I'm gonna still have to budget for a new air conditioner, a new furnace, and another thing I'm gonna have to budget for with a second house, just like I have to with my primary residence, is gonna be a new roof. I mean, every I would say 20 years, give or take, typically you're gonna have to replace your roof. So those are expenses that I would have to budget for twice, once for my primary residence and once for my secondary residence. And then, of course, even in a decent neighborhood, I would still have to, in the back of my mind at least, I would still have to take into consideration that vandalism could happen. Or maybe vandalism could happen. Just out of nowhere, I might develop some faulty wiring, and then that could lead to a house fire. Because typically, whenever I left my secondary residence vacant, I typically left on a couple of lights to deter people from breaking in or doing anything they shouldn't be doing to my property at the time. So, of course, I still had to pay utility bills over there because I was utilizing utilities by running the heat, the air, and keeping on a couple of lights, and also running the refrigerator and keeping it cold. So, I had to deal with that. And of course, I had to also keep homeowners insurance on it because if anything were to happen to that house, like if I mean, I did have people watch over that house during the time I've owned it. So if they were to call me and tell me that, hey man, so and so broke my window, or such and such happened to the house, and they gave me pictures, I would have to then call my insurance company, and then they would go out there and assess the situation, and most likely I would have to be there in person to so they can assess everything, and then they'll go ahead and make the repairs. And of course, I'll have to pay my deductible, and chances are when it comes time to renew my policy, they would have raised my policy premium. They would have raised my policy because I took out a claim. And honestly, I took a bit of a risk when I owned that second house up in Indiana last year, because technically, and there's a lot of insurance companies that have this in their agreement when you sign it. So when you sign your agreements, try to read it thoroughly, or at least have a lawyer with you that could read and interpret what the documents mean. But typically, somewhere on many of your insurance documents for homeowners insurance, if your house is left unattended for a certain amount of time or longer, and if anything happens to your house, technically that insurance company does not have to honor, they don't have to honor your policy. Because when you signed that policy, you told them that you were that house was gonna be occupied. Now, in my second house, it was not a rental. I told them that I was gonna occupy the house. So, for those of you that own second houses, unless there's a special insurance policy that deals with secondary home ownership, to my knowledge, I don't think there is, but I don't work in insurance, so I could be wrong. Maybe there is. If there is, drop a comment below. Let us all know. To my knowledge, if you own a second house or whatever, and it sits vacant, and it's been vacant for, let's say, several months at a time, and during that time of vacancy, something bad happens to the house, like it catches on fire and it burns down to the ground, or the property is heavily vandalized, technically your insurance company will not have to pay for damages. So you could be sitting around with the house burnt down to the ground, and the money that you spent on buying that house, you're going to be SOL. Or the house could be heavily vandalized, and now you're going to be sitting around having to save up a ton of money to make those necessary repairs. Now, if you buy a second house on a mortgage and something crazy happens, you're going to really be SOL. Chances are you're going to be forced to have to foreclose on your home, and then the bank is going to attempt to sue you because they don't have anything to, the asset they've that they would have used for leverage for the loan that they granted you. They don't have it because it's damaged. So, now you're going to be in a very sticky situation to where the bank is going to attempt to sue you. And in order for you to protect yourself, you're going to most likely have to file bankruptcy. And now your credit's going to be messed up. Your money going to be messed up. And it's just going to be a hot mess. Buy that second home before you even buy a primary home. For those of you that are currently not homeowners, just understand that when it comes to any kind of home ownership, not only do you have to take into consideration the cost of the house itself, and but beyond the cost of the house itself, beyond the interest rates that you may have to pay if you take out a mortgage, you're going to also have to factor in the cost of utilities, the cost of homeowners insurance, property taxes, the cost to, the amount of money that you might have to save up per month to make certain repairs and replacements, such as a new roof every 20 years or so, a new climate control system every 20 years or so, like I had to do. And of course, you're going to have to take into consideration that something bad might happen to your house, and you might need a little bit of money set aside to take out to put towards, like if you have to take out a claim, whatever you gotta pay for your I forgot what they call it, but whatever payment that you gotta pay in order for the insurance company to honor your claim, you're gonna have to have some money in your savings account to pay for that. So those are just a few things off the top of my head that I could think of that you're gonna have to consider when going into home ownership. All right, folks, that's all I gotta say on this one. It's been about 21 minutes. So hopefully you guys got something out of this video. You guys know what to do by now. You guys have a blessed one, and I will see you on the next one.